it's not just CNN host Don Lemon. Others in the media are also blaming the actions of one Republican congressman on President Trump. My next guest says President Obama literally put cops' lives in danger after comments like this one.
There is a long history in this country of African Americans and Latinos being stopped by law enforcement disproportionately. And that's just a fact. The African American community is also knowledgeable that there is a history of racial disparities in the application of our criminal laws. We have seen too many instances of police officers interacting with primarily African American, often poor, in ways that raise troubling questions.
Well, joining me now, Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark. You know, you had been on this network several times talking about it at the time. There were 6 race riots under President Obama. Did these comments put lives in danger at the time?
Well, you know, first of all, he did a lot of damage with some of his rhetoric that incited, even if it was unintentional. When presidents speak, they have to be very careful. And, you know, some of these entities that are trying to blame Trump and continuing to undermine his presidency, they didn't hold Eric Holder, Loretta Lynch, or Barack Obama responsible or accountable for some of the rhetoric that incited hatred against the American police officer. How about the incitement of violence at UC Berkeley, where people can't come? Milo Yiannopoulos couldn't go without being literally assaulted. Riots, property damage. We saw it the inaugural week in Washington, D.C., the same sort of thing. And CNN and some of these other liberal entities, New York Times, Washington Post, had no problem with it.
You know, do you think that, and again, this is back in history, but do you think that Obama's treatment of ISIS, when he called them the JV team, put lives in danger?
Sure, because he was almost like an apologist for them. Every time there was a terror attack, the first thing he did was start to lecture Americans about, you know, being Islamophobes and xenophobes, instead of talking about the heinous behavior that they would attack children, women, innocent civilians, you know, spreading terror. And again, you know, it was always America's fault. It was always somebody else's fault. So, you know, we can go back and forth if you want. And I don't mean you personally, but, you know, about who's to blame and whatnot. But, you know, there's enough still in reserve from the 8 years of Obama that did great damage, I believe, in this country.
Well, you know, Sheriff, I mean, in the eyes of the liberal media, and we can move it to today now, as you mentioned, you know, it's like President Obama can do no wrong. He's this, you know, this heavenly figure. President Trump seems to be able to do nothing right. Do you think that all of this is fair to Trump so early in his presidency?
No, it's not. Like I said, it's the continued undermining of this president. Everything is his fault. You know, I saw the video and the interview with Don Lemon from the Communist News Network at CNN. You know, these folks would blame. Don Lemon could get a flat tire and he'd blame Donald Trump. He could lose his car keys or misplace them and he'd blame Donald Trump. They're losing credibility. The American people are smart. They're watching and listening to this. They're not buying into any of this. This was a political gotcha game with what happened out in Montana. I don't have all the facts, but the first thing that the left and these liberal news organizations do, the first thing they do is try to somehow tie it into Donald Trump. For heaven's sakes, Donald Trump's over in the Middle East.
I said that earlier, Sheriff. Thank you. Sheriff David Clark. We'll leave it there with you. Thank you, sir.